The rocks had stopped moving 3 weeks ago. The dust had settled. The valley was quiet now, the kind of quiet that felt wrong, like the land itself was holding its breath. Sora had not moved either. She sat on the black shelf of cooled lava above the buried valley, her obsidian scales dull in the dim red light of Verk's sun. She was enormous, large enough that the compact monitoring drones circling at a safe distance looked like insects near a mountain. Her amber eyes were open, but she was not watching anything. She was simply there, present in the way that grief makes a person present completely, heavily, with nowhere else to go. The 3 eggs were gone, buried under 40 meters of rock and ash when the ridge collapsed. The seismic sensors had recorded the event. The compact filed it under natural geological incident until one of their own deep scan teams found trace elements of off-world drilling compounds in the rock layer above the slide zone. Someone had loosened that ridge. Someone who wanted Drath-scale fragments and did not care what else they took. They were gone before anyone could act. The compact was still looking. Sora did not care about the investigation. She sat above the place where her eggs were buried, and she did not move. Ambassador Tis stood in the small briefing room of Redstone Hold Colony and looked at the humans assembled before him with the particular expression of someone who considered the meeting a waste of his time. He was tall, pale-chittened, with 4 arms folded in a posture that communicated authority in his species. To the colonists, he mostly looked uncomfortable in the low-ceilinged room. "The situation is deteriorating," he said. "The Dragon Queen has entered a prolonged grief state. In Drath physiology, extended grief without resolution has one of 2 outcomes. She either withdraws permanently, which removes her as a political and territorial force, or she transitions into a rage state. Given her age and status, a rage state would be seismic. Literally. The shockwaves from a full Drath Queen in fury have been recorded to collapse tunnel systems within a 40-kilometer radius." He let that sit for a moment. "Your colony sits inside that radius. I am advising all residents to remain within reinforced holds until the situation resolves. Do not approach the valley. Do not send drones. Do not attempt contact. The compact has specialists who will handle this." The colonists murmured among themselves. Doran, seated near the back, said nothing. He was a big, quiet man with calloused hands and a habit of watching rather than talking. He listened to everything Tis said. Then he looked to the seat beside him, which was empty. He had not noticed Rail leave. The boy was already on the ridge. Rail was 12, small for his age, with dark eyes that noticed things adults tended to miss. He had been watching Sora for 6 days from different high points along the ridge line, long before Tis arrived, long before the colony meeting started. He had a small pack with 2 ration bars, a thermal wrap, and a handheld that he mostly used to check wind direction. He was not reckless. He had thought about this. He found a flat rock about 200 meters above the valley floor with a clear line of sight to where Sora sat. He settled there, cross-legged, and looked at her. She was very still. He had seen still before, the kind of still his father went when they got the news about his mother, 2 years back. The cave-in on level 3. Doran had sat at the kitchen table and gone so quiet that the room felt like it was filling with something heavy and invisible. Rail had not known what to do then. He had sat at the table too, and they had both been quiet together, and somehow that had been the right thing even though it solved nothing. He thought about that now, watching Sora. One of the compact drones drifted past him, then circled back. Its sensor array pivoted toward him. He waved at it. It hovered for a moment, then moved on. He was a colonist kid on a ridge, not a priority. Rail opened one of his ration bars and ate half of it slowly, watching the sky go orange as the red sun dipped lower. Verk's evenings were the color of cooling iron. He had always liked them. Below, Sora's amber eye shifted, just slightly. The angle changed. It was not looking at the buried valley anymore. It was looking at the ridge. Rail did not move. He finished his half of the ration bar. He folded the wrapper carefully and put it in his pack. Then he looked back at the amber eye, far below and enormous, and felt no particular urge to run. She looked the way he had felt after his mother died, like the world had gone flat and nothing in it made sense anymore, like sitting was all that was possible. He understood that. The drone came back and circled him twice. He ignored it. The wind off the volcanic plain was cold and smelled of sulfur and ash. He pulled his jacket tighter and stayed where he was. Below, the Dragon Queen watched him back. Neither of them moved as the sky darkened. Neither of them left. The next morning, Rael came back. He did not sneak. He did not try to hide in the rocks or move low along the ridge. He walked the way he always walked, steady, unhurried, picking his path carefully because the cooled lava fields were uneven, and a twisted ankle out here would be a real problem. He had a second ration bar in his pack, a full water canteen, and the thermal wrap in case he needed to sit through another cold evening. Sora was exactly where she had been. She had not moved at all through the night. The compact monitoring station on the southern ridge had been watching the valley continuously. When Rael's body signature appeared on their sensors moving down the slope toward the valley floor, 3 different alerts triggered simultaneously. By the time the morning shift operator processed what she was seeing, the boy was already halfway down. Ambassador Tis was informed within 4 minutes. He was not pleased. "That is a colonist child," he said, looking at the feed. "Why is a colonist child walking toward the Dragon Queen?" Nobody at the monitoring station had a good answer for that. Tis authorized a retrieval drone, a large one, with a gripping arm capable of lifting a human-sized object and moving it rapidly to safety. It launched from the station and flew toward Rael at speed. On the feed, the operator watched the drone close the distance. She watched Rael hear it coming and glance up. She watched him step to the side calmly, as if making room for it to pass. The drone adjusted. It came in low, arm extended. It never reached him. Sora's tail moved. That was all one sweep, almost lazy, like a sleeping creature brushing away an insect. The drone came apart against the volcanic rock 40 meters to Rael's left. No explosion, just a flat crunch and a scatter of pieces. The operator stared at her screen. "She destroyed the retrieval drone," she said, mostly to herself. "I can see that," Tis said. Rael had stopped walking. He looked at the wreckage of the drone. Then he looked up at Sora. Her amber eye was on him. He gave a small nod like he was acknowledging something and kept walking. He stopped about 40 meters from her. The scale of the difference was almost funny. She was the size of a large building, and he was a small 12-year-old standing on black rock with a pack on his back. He looked up at her for a moment. Then he sat down, cross-legged on the ground. He opened his pack and took out the ration bar, ate half of it. Then he broke the other half carefully along the seam of the wrapper and set it on the rock in front of him, in her direction. An offering, meaningless in scale. The piece of ration bar was smaller relative to her than a single grain of rice would be to a person. He knew that. He put it there anyway. Sora's amber eye moved to the piece of ration bar. It stayed there for a moment. Then it moved back to Rael. Rael said quietly, "I'm not going anywhere." His voice was small in the open volcanic plain. The wind took it and scattered it, but she had heard. He was certain of that. Something in the angle of her head shifted by a fraction. At the monitoring station, Tis had gone very still. He was watching the same feed as everyone else. His 4 arms were folded tight. "His father is going to be very upset," the operator said. "His father doesn't know yet," said the analyst beside her. "I checked. Doran is in Tunnel 6 doing a structural assessment. Someone should tell him." "Yes," said Tis slowly, still watching the screen. "Someone should, but—" he paused. "The Queen has not reacted with aggression. She destroyed the drone, but she did not strike the boy. She is aware of him. She is choosing to allow his presence." "Why?" the operator asked. Tis did not answer. He did not have one. Down in the valley, Rael had stopped talking and gone back to sitting quietly. His thermal wrap was across his shoulders now. He was not looking directly at Sora's eye. He was looking at the middle distance, at the black and rust-colored rock of the valley floor, like someone sitting in a waiting room, patient, in no hurry. Sora's breathing was deep and slow, each exhale a low rumble that Rael could feel through the rock beneath him. It was oddly calming, like sitting near something immense and old that had decided, for now, that you were not a threat. He did not think he was making anything better. He was not trying to. He had no plan beyond being here. He thought that maybe that was the only honest thing he had to offer, just being here, in this ugly, ash-smelling valley, where something enormous and ancient was carrying a weight that nothing in the galaxy had bothered to sit next to. The red sun moved across the sky. The volcanic plain ticked and cracked as temperatures shifted. Somewhere far above, a compact drone circled at a very respectful altitude. Rael sat, Sora sat. The day moved around them both. When the sun went down, Verk's sky turned colors that had no names in most languages. Deep red fading to black at the edges, with veins of orange where the distant lava fields reflected upward. The volcanic horizon glowed in a low, steady line, like embers that had been burning for 1,000 years and had no intention of stopping. Rael pulled his thermal wrap around his shoulders and did not leave. He had found a slightly better rock, wider, flatter, and moved to it without going any closer to Sora. He arranged his pack as a backrest and settled in. The temperature was dropping fast. His breath made small clouds. He had enough water and one more ration bar, and he was fine with that. He had camped worse on level 4 of the colony tunnels during the ventilation outage last year. Sora had not moved, but her breathing had changed slightly over the course of the afternoon, marginally slower, if that was possible. Like something deep inside her had decided that the boy sitting on the rock was not worth the energy of being alarmed about. For a long time there was no sound except the wind and the distant creak of the cooling plain. Then Sora spoke. It was not in any language Rael knew. The sound came from somewhere deep in her chest, a low, rolling vibration that traveled through the rock and into his boots and up through his legs and settled somewhere near his ribs. He could not hear it so much as feel it. It rose and fell in patterns that had structure, not random, not mechanical. Language. Drath, he assumed, which he had heard fragments of before when the older colonists talked about the early days of the settlement, when Sora had still been speaking to people. He did not understand a single word. He waited until the sound had finished. Then he said, "I don't know what that means, I'm sorry," a pause, "but I'm listening." Silence. Then he said, because it felt wrong to just sit there with nothing, "My mother died 2 years ago, cave-in on level 3. She was a tunnel engineer like my dad." He looked at the glowing horizon. "For a long time after, I used to come outside at night because being inside felt like the walls were pressing. Everything inside had her in it. The mug she picked, the chair she always sat in. Outside, at least, was just outside. Nobody had put anything of hers in the sky." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if that's anything like what you're feeling. Probably not. They were eggs and I never got to meet them either, but that's not, I mean you knew them. You were there with them before. I think that's worse, actually, knowing what you're missing." The thermal wrap crinkled when he shifted his weight. The wind moved across the valley. Sora made the sound again. Different this time, shorter, lower. It had a different quality, not speaking to the air, directed at him. Rael listened to it with his whole body. Then he said, "Yeah." He was not sure what he was agreeing to, but it felt like the right answer. Back at Redstone Hold, Doran had come up from Tunnel 6 to find 3 colony staffers waiting for him with expressions he did not like. They showed him the feed. He sat down on the nearest available surface, a tool crate, and watched his son sitting in a dark valley 40 kilometers away next to the Dragon Queen of Verk. "He's not hurt," Ren said. She was standing nearby with her arms folded, which was her version of trying to look calm. She hasn't moved toward him. The compact has been watching since this morning. This morning, Doran repeated. Yes. He's been out there all day. And last evening, we think, one of the drone sweeps picked up his biosign on the ridge yesterday at dusk. Doran put his face in his hands. He stayed that way for a while. Then he looked up and said, "What is he doing?" "Sitting," Ren said. "Mostly. Talking sometimes. The audio pickup is too far out to catch his words clearly." She hesitated. "Ambassador Tiss has reviewed the feeds. He says, and I'm quoting, he says that in 40 years of compact diplomatic service, he has never seen a Drath Queen in acute grief permit any living creature within 200 meters of her position." Doran looked at the feed. His son was a small shape in the thermal imaging, wrapped in his camping blanket, sitting very still in the dark near something that could flatten the colony with one bad morning. "He's going to be so grounded," Doran said. Ren made a sound that was almost a laugh. On the feed, nothing dramatic happened. The boy sat. The queen sat. The volcanic sky burned quietly overhead. Then, after a long silence, Sora lowered her head not all the way, not to the ground, but lower than it had been. The amber eye came level with the ridge where her eggs were buried, and she made a sound that was not language. It was something else, low and long and without any hard edges. Rael heard it and said nothing. He did not try to fill the silence with anything. He just stayed. That was all he did. And somehow, on every monitor in every compact station within range, that simple fact felt like the most significant thing that had happened on Verk in weeks. Rael fell asleep somewhere around the 3rd hour of darkness. It was not a decision. His body simply made it for him. The cold was stable, the thermal wrap was doing its job, and the deep rhythmic sound of Sora's breathing had settled into his chest like a slow clock. He slid sideways on the flat rock, tucked his arms in and went still. When he woke, it was to pale light and warmth he could not immediately explain. He sat up and looked around. The valley was dim and gray with early morning. The volcanic horizon had gone from orange to dull amber. He was still on his rock. His pack was still behind him. Sora had not moved closer, but at some point in the night her body had shifted. Not toward him, she had turned very slightly so that her flank was angled to the prevailing wind, and the effect of that was a windbreak. The cold that had been cutting across the valley from the north was blocked. The space around Rael's rock was noticeably warmer than the open air. She had not done it loudly. She had not made a thing of it. He looked at her. Her amber eye was open and watching him. "Good morning," he said. She said nothing for a moment. Then, in compact standard, slow and deliberate as someone choosing each word very carefully, "You slept." "Yeah," he stretched his arms above his head. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "You were not afraid." He thought about that honestly. "No," he said, "not really." She was quiet again. Her eye did not leave him. He pulled out his last ration bar, broke it in half out of habit, and then stopped and looked at the half in his hand. He set both halves on his lap and ate one piece slowly. He did not put the other half toward her this time. He had figured out by now that the gesture was about the intention, not the food, and he did not need to keep making it. "Why did you come here?" Sora said, not an accusation, genuine. He took a second to think about how to answer that honestly. "Nobody should have to be alone when they're hurting that much," he said. It seemed wrong. Everybody else was staying back and talking about the situation like it was a problem to solve. But you're not a problem, you lost something. He looked at the ridge above the buried valley. "That's not a problem, that's just the worst thing." The silence after that lasted long enough that he wondered if he had said something wrong. Then Sora spoke, not in compact standard. In Drath first, a long, low sentence that moved through the rock and into his bones. Then she switched, haltingly, to standard. "They were the color of deep vein ore, my young, the shells." She stopped, started again. When the light was right, red and black and something between. I would press here. She moved one enormous claw to the side of her jaw, to the shell, and listen. There was movement, not sound. Movement. Rael was very still. He did not speak. I never heard their voices, she said. The rocks took that. He nodded slowly. He did not say he was sorry. He did not say anything, because anything he said would be smaller than what she had just given him, and she deserved better than small words dropped into the space after something that large. He just looked at her and let her see that he had heard it. At the monitoring station, the audio had been captured on every recorder running. The morning shift operator had stopped typing. The analyst beside her had his chin in his hand and was staring at the screen with the expression of someone doing arithmetic that keeps coming out strange. Ambassador Tis had been there since before dawn. He watched the feed with all four arms folded tight. When Sora finished speaking, he was quiet for a long time. She has not spoken of the young to any compact representative, he said finally. Not once, not in any of the formal contact attempts. I know, said the operator. She told a child, a human child. I know. Tis unfolded one set of arms and pressed two fingers to the side of his head, which in his species indicated deep confusion. My models have no framework for this. The Drath do not open grief to strangers. The process of grief in their culture is entirely internal until the rite of speaking, which is only conducted with family lineage. He's not family, the operator said. No, said Tis, he is not. Another pause, and yet. Back in the valley, Rael had started talking again, slowly, quietly, about his mother. Small things. The way she used to leave tool marks on the kitchen table when she brought work home. The specific sound of her laugh when something actually caught her off guard, which was rare. The way she had explained tectonic stress to him when he was 8 using a piece of bread and her thumbs, and how that image had made him understand rock better than anything he learned in colony school. Sora listened without moving. Her eye was on him the entire time, not watching him the way a predator watches, watching him the way you watch someone who is saying something that matters. Outside the valley, the red sun climbed. The volcanic plain ticked and shifted. The world was going about its business. Inside the valley, two creatures who had each lost something irreplaceable were doing the only thing that actually helps, telling each other about it, out loud, in the presence of someone willing to hear. The alert came through every compact channel at once, which was unusual enough to make the morning shift operator sit up straight before she had even fully read it. Unauthorized vessel, off-world registry, flagged for previous Verk trespass, landed on the far ridge northern approach 40 minutes ago. They had come back. The operator pulled up the secondary feed. The poaching crew was 4 people, heavy-built, moving with the casual confidence of people who had done this before and gotten away with it. They were carrying suppression equipment, short-range electromagnetic pulse emitters designed to stun large fauna, the kind of gear that was illegal in protected zones and very effective on anything with a nervous system larger than a ground predator. They also had collection tools, cutting equipment. High-value Drath-scale fragments could fetch enormous prices on black market channels, and a queen who had been sitting motionless in a valley for weeks was a resource to people who thought about the world in terms of what could be taken from it. Tis tried to raise them on the emergency channel. No response. He launched 2 compact drones toward the northern ridge. Both were shot down with handheld suppressors before they got close. These people had prepared for interference. In the valley, Rael felt the vibration before he heard anything. It was subtle, a change in the frequency coming through the rock under him. He had spent enough time on Verk and enough time near Sora to recognize that the vibration was coming from her, not the ground. He looked up. Her eye had shifted direction. She was looking north toward the far ridge, and something had changed in her. It was not large or dramatic. She had not moved, but the quality of her stillness was different. It was no longer the stillness of grief. Rail turned and looked north. He saw them coming down the far slope, 4 figures, moving toward the valley floor. Even at this distance he could see the gear they were carrying. He understood immediately. The shape of it was obvious in the way that some things are obvious before your brain has fully caught up with your eyes. He stood up. One of the poachers in front spotted him and said something to the others. They slowed. The one in the lead, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray thermal suit with no colony markings, called across the valley, "Hey, kid, get out of the way. You don't want to be here for this." Rail did not get out of the way. He took 2 steps forward so that he was standing between Sara and the approaching crew. He had nothing in his hands. No weapon, no tool, nothing. His pack was on the rock behind him. He was a small 12-year-old in a jacket and boots standing in an ash-covered valley, and he put himself between the poachers and the Dragon Queen. The lead poacher laughed. It was not a mean laugh exactly, more the laugh of someone who has encountered an obstacle so small it barely registers. "Kid," he said, still moving, "I'm going to count to 3 and then I'm going to pick you up and move you." He got to 2. Behind Rail something changed. Not a sound, not a movement, a pressure, like the air in the valley was being rearranged by something deciding to become present. Rail felt the hair on his arms stand up. He did not turn around. He kept his eyes on the poachers and trusted what was happening behind him. The lead poacher stopped walking. His laugh dropped off his face like something cut it loose. Sara rose. She had been still so long that the movement seemed impossible, like a mountain deciding to stand. She uncurled from the shelf of black rock with a slow, deliberate weight, each movement precise, and the sound of it was the deep groan of something enormous coming back to itself. Her full height in the valley was staggering. The dim red sun hit her obsidian scales and scattered across the ash-covered ground like fragments of black fire. Her amber eyes were open, fully open, bright. She had recognized the suppression equipment. She had recognized the cutting tools, and she had recognized something else, the frequency trace of their ship. She had heard that engine when they were drilling above her valley. She had felt the ridge shift. She had heard the rocks begin to move. She knew exactly who these people were. One of the poachers raised the suppression emitter and fired. The pulse hit Sara in the chest. She did not stop. She did not even blink. She took 1 step forward and the ground shuddered. The crew broke. 2 of them ran. 2 of them froze, which was worse for them in the end, because Sara was faster than anything had a right to be when it moved with purpose. She did not kill them. Rail realized this consciously, watching it happen. She could have. She had the reach, the mass, and the heat. She did not use any of it that way. She simply pinned them 1 foreleg on each pair, pressing them flat against the volcanic rock with exactly enough force to make it clear they were not going anywhere. Then she raised her head, and in a voice like grinding stone, she opened the compact emergency frequency. The one she had not touched in weeks. She gave the grid coordinates of the valley. She gave the vessel ID of the poaching ship. She gave the names of the 2 who had run, which meant she had already read the registration data from their equipment. The monitoring station went completely silent. Tis stared at the feed with all 4 arms hanging loose at his sides. "She made the call herself," the operator said quietly. "Yes," said Tis. Under Sara's foreleg, the lead poacher was cursing in 3 languages. Rail walked over, stood near the edge of 1 great clawed foot, and looked down at the man. That, Rail said, was a bad decision. He looked up at Sara. Her eye came down to him. The amber was very bright. Something in it had changed from the day before. Not all the grief was gone. Grief does not go that quickly, but something else was in there now alongside it. She had come back, not all the way, but back. The compact security vessels arrived in under an hour, which was fast for Verk. 4 ships, 2 ground teams, 1 containment unit for the poaching crew. The 2 who had run were picked up on the northern ridge without much trouble. All four were processed on-site, with an efficiency that suggested the compact had been waiting for a reason to move on them for some time. Tis came down himself. He had spent 2 days watching the valley from screens, and now he walked across the ash-covered floor in full diplomatic attire, his 4 arms arranged in the formal posture of official approach, following the exact protocols the compact used when addressing draft leadership. There was a specific cadence to the footsteps, a particular way to hold the hands, a formal greeting phrase in draft that took 3 years to learn to pronounce correctly. He had practiced it for years. He spoke it now carefully, correctly. Sora did not look at him. She was looking past him, past the security teams and the containment unit and the vessels on the ridge. Her amber eyes found Rael, who was standing off to one side, pack on his back, eating the last of his ration bar. Tis stopped walking. Sora lowered her head, not a diplomatic gesture, not the formal draft bow that signified recognition of status. Something else. She lowered her head to Rael's level, her enormous face coming down until the amber eye was near enough that Rael could see his own reflection in it. Her breath came out warm against his jacket. "You stayed," she said in compact standard, low and unhurried. Rael finished chewing, swallowed, and said, "I said I would." She was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke a single draft phrase. It was short, 4 words. The translation would take linguists 3 days to fully unpack, but the rough standard equivalent was something like, "You are counted among mine." Behind Tis, the compact linguist on the security team inhaled sharply. Tis turned to look at her. She had gone slightly pale. "Ambassador," she said carefully. She just invoked the wardship clause. Second register, draft sovereign code. She is formally declaring the boy under her line's protection. Tis looked at her. "It means," the linguist continued, "that in draft law he is kin adjacent. Any harm to him is harm to her line. Any territory he stands on becomes a protected zone. He is the first non-draft in recorded compact history to receive this declaration." Tis turned back to look at Rael. Rael was looking up at Sora and saying, "I don't really know what that means." "It means," Sora said, "that you are not alone either." Rael opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the ground for a second. Then he nodded once and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would be the right size for that. Doran arrived 20 minutes later. He had not waited for the official escort to organize itself. He had found a colony ground vehicle, driven it himself across the lava field at a speed that would have concerned the vehicle's manufacturer, and arrived with dust on his jacket and the expression of a man who had been holding a very complicated feeling in his chest for approximately 36 hours. He came across the valley floor at a fast walk, past the compact security teams without looking at them, past Ambassador Tis without acknowledging him, and stopped in front of his son. He looked at Rael for a long moment. Rael looked back. Then Doran pulled him into a hug that lifted him slightly off the ground and lasted for a while. When he set him down, Rael said, "I was okay." "I know," Doran said. His voice was rough. "I watched the whole thing." "Ren showed you the feed." "Yes," a pause. "I should ground you for a month." Rael considered this. "Probably," he said. Doran looked up at Sora, who was watching this exchange from above with the patient attention of something very large and very old. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he gave her the same small nod his son had given her 2 days ago, simple, direct, acknowledging something without trying to name it. Sora's eyes shifted. She did not nod back, but one foreclaw resting on the valley floor settled slightly, a motion that the linguist would later describe privately as the draft equivalent of a nod. Tis filed 7 reports over the following week. None of them satisfied him. He kept trying to find the variable that explained it, the factor, the technique, the precedent. There had to be a framework. Diplomacy ran on frameworks. You identified interests, established communication protocols, built trust through structured exchange. The boy had done none of that. He had brought ration bars and a thermal wrap and sat on a rock. Tis was still writing the 8th report when he received a formal communique from Sora, her first voluntary contact with the Compact in over a month. It was addressed not to the Compact diplomatic office. It was addressed to Redstone Hold Colony, attention, Rail, with a copy forwarded to the Compact as a courtesy. She was prepared to discuss terms for a joint survey of the Northern Valley. She was also, the communique noted, in the process of selecting a new nesting site. The survey should account for this. Tis read the communique 3 times. Then he set it down and sat with it for a while. That evening, Rail sat on the ridge above the valley. The volcanic sky was going through its nightly sequence, red to deep orange to the color of cooling iron. Verk's sun was a dull red eye sinking below the horizon. Sora was below him, not in the grief spot above the buried ridge but further along the valley floor in a different position. Moving, slowly but moving. Her tail rested loosely near the base of the ridge where he sat, not blocking the path, not a cage, just present, the way you sit near someone without crowding them to make sure they know you are there. Rail ate his ration bar. The good kind this time. Ren had sent him out with a proper food pack after his father officially ungrounded him, which had taken 4 days, and one very long kitchen table conversation. The sky went dark, the lava fields glowed. Below, Sora made a low sound that traveled through the rock and into his boots and settled somewhere near his ribs. He did not know the words, he answered anyway. Across the galaxy, the Compact would spend years trying to write the definitive account of what happened on Verk. Committees were formed. Papers were published. Ambassador Tis eventually gave a lecture on the subject that became required reading in 3 diplomatic academies. Not one of them got it right. The answer was too simple for a report. A boy had sat next to someone in pain and refused to leave. That was all. That was everything.